There are basically two kinds of people watching this video. The first saw the title and thumbnail and were curious, but maybe also incredulous because they know that a DAW is an ordinary part of every modern musical workflow. It might be something that can be frustrating and time-consuming, but the fact is it introduces so much power, precision, opportunity for creativity that just wasn't there before. They can't imagine a universe in which they don't use a DAW and as a result see no purpose in hating it. And then there are people like me, people who have been sucked into or consumed by the dark side of all those good things about working in a DAW. They've fallen down the slippery slope of endless editing and decision paralysis and ultimately felt suffocated or maybe just exhausted by the process of performing that perfect form of music. This video is for both of those groups of people because I find myself in my current project caught between those extremes. I have for the last several years worked exclusively outside of the box, doing all of my recording and mixing in multi-trackers or similar, what I like to call DAWless devices. And it's no exaggeration to say that stepping away from the DAW reignited my love for recording music. The challenge though is that now for two projects in a row, I have found myself forced back into working in a DAW, at least for the mixing stage. My last project broke inside of the Zoom R4. It was, I think, my fault, but it was still a problem that I really felt like I could only adequately address by mixing the song in a DAW. And I began my current recording project by making a fundamental error, and that is recording a core track that had very little rhythmic information and was not performed to a click. I loved the feel and the energy of the performance. I thought it captured exactly what I wanted this song to be, but I soon realized that there were some inconsistencies that made it extremely difficult for me to record overdubs. And I decided early on that I was going to address that problem by mixing the song in a DAW and editing to smooth out some of the rough spots in the song. So I know why I'm here and what I have to do, but that doesn't make my job any easier or more pleasant because the fact remains that I don't like mixing in a DAW. When I sort of was forced to do it on my last project, I spent probably 5 hours doing something that if I had been working in a, half decent multi-tracker, I would have done in a matter of like 30 minutes at the end of the project. And in this particular case, I kind of went hog wild, and the thought of going into a DAW and mixing those is not exactly my idea of a good time. I needed to find a way to mix this song without being sucked into my computer screen like it was a black hole. And to do that, I knew I needed a plan. A very specific kind of plan that's informed by the lessons I have learned about mixing using multi-trackers and other DAWless devices. I'm calling it my minimalist mix workflow. The idea is to mix the song in stages, doing things that are very straightforward and that I've kind of plotted out in advance. And then at the end of each stage to create a mix down of the song, with the idea that I'll be able to reflect on the progress that I make in each stage of the process, maybe think about which of the stages are actually the most significant, and ultimately plot the progression of the song over what I hope is a fairly streamlined mixing session. And it better be streamlined because I've only got about 45 minutes in real time before my family returns from an outing. And I want to be able to do this mix and talk about it at a reasonable volume, so this is my time. I'm gonna make the most of it. Let's get to work. First thing we have to do is get all of these tracks into Audacity. So first I'm gonna bring in this guide vocal and this keyboard bandoneon. Bandoneon. We've got all the tracks in here, and the first thing that you're gonna notice is that these are all clipped to shit. Luckily, they're not actually clipped. They're 32-bit float files, and as you'll see when I normalize this bass track, let's normalize this to -6, it actually isn't clipped. And that's just something that happens, like I said, when you're recording with this device. So now that I've dragged them all in, the first thing I'm gonna do is exactly what I did for this bass. I'm going to go through each of these and normalize to -6. Can I do them all together? Is that gonna work? Boom! Let's just hear how the mix sounds with everything just normalized at exactly the same level. Shine like a Saturday. Straight laces are tied up tight. So there's obviously quite an imbalance there. Next on my list is what I'm calling the rough balance stage. And what I'm gonna do is just do a quick pass of setting, panning, and levels for all of these tracks. Okay, so I'm gonna go down here, mute all this stuff for now. Now, instead of those 25 or so tracks, I really have just 5 tracks. Let's just start here and start mixing. I'm gonna try to keep that vocal where it is.
Straight laces are tied up tight.
I'll move it way over here. So obviously the cajon is way too low.
Undone. The bass drops and they dim the lights. Your finger.
All right, I know I said I wasn't gonna do any of this right now, but that's the biggest problem in the entire song, is where I played that snare. I really, really jumped the gun. I'm gonna do this, piss off. Let's get this out of here. All right.
Dim the lights. Your fingers press against mine.
All right, I think this something like
Dim
the
the lights.
All right, I think I need to move that too.
The lights. Your fingers press against mine.
The song may be saved now. Now let's add some other elements. Super loud.
I seek whatever.
That's fine.
Warm satin dresses and a cloud.
Fine.
It's warm satin dresses and a cloud.
This sounds so good.
I seek whatever you hide.
Honestly, that sounds great.
I seek whatever
I'm gonna let it come in right there. This is maybe gonna seem a little bit crazy, but I'm just about to chop this entire thing. Goodbye. Listen to that. Perfect. Nice space.
you hide.
This is the sound of me tapping 2 wooden spatulas against each other. That's a good sound. I'm not even sure I like that. You know what? I don't need this. Get the heck out of here. And what are we left with? We're left with a rough mix.
You shine like a Saturday night.
Okay. With only one exception, this little bit over here that I couldn't help but tinkle. All I've done is just panning and levels. And it's helped me create a rough mix. So we're gonna go through, do an export here. And now dad duty calls sooner than I expected, but I've only been recording this portion of the video for 21 minutes and 13 seconds. I've cut some stuff out, thankfully for you. We're making pretty good progress. I have a few more things that I want to do, and I will get to those as soon as I can. And we're back for what I am thinking of as the broad strokes EQ phase. Now, the idea of this is to trust my experience and gut about what things tend to cloud a mix and just implementing a bunch of EQ really, really quickly. In this case, I'm going to do it with a very specific plugin in Audacity. It's a 2-band EQ. The bass is at 250 hertz and the treble is at, I think, 4K. I have made notes here and I'm just going to implement these changes, and you can't see until I scroll down all these places where I say cut bass. I mean cutting here by 10 decibels. I know that probably sounds insane, but that's what I did in a broad strokes way on my last session, and it was really, really effective. So without further ado, let's get to work. Okay, I lost you there for a minute, but you didn't miss much. I just went through and did what I said I was gonna do. Mostly, I ended up doing a little bit more tweaking to the actual EQ amounts, and I only made minor adjustments to volume based on those EQ changes, mostly because the goal of this broad strokes EQ is to get rid of stuff that is not essential anyway, not to radically alter the sounds, just to make the mix a little bit cleaner. And we're gonna figure out how clean it is when we compare this mix down to the mix down I made earlier. And the last step of this process is what I'm going to call the muting or the destructive editing stage. If I was doing a mix in like Tascam's Model 12 in real time, I would be making liberal use of the mute buttons in order to clean up sections of the track if I know there's going to be noise or excess, or if I just want radical dynamic shifts. And there are sections of this audio that I want to clean up. And if I was a real DAW enthusiast, I might go in and try to be subtle with some like really nice fades in and out of silent sections, but I don't want to do that, and I know how much time I spent doing that in my last mix. So instead, I'm just going to be kind of brutal with my cuts to get rid of some of the noise. That means for pretty much all of these tracks is cutting out information at the start, What's this? How bad is it? Whatever this is.
Day night.
That's something I'm trying to sing. I'm not worried about that. I'm really not worried about anything that I'm seeing in here. And that's really how it went for most of this stage of my process. I'm going to save you all the nothing and instead focus on the things that were actually interesting. I hate this nylon guitar. Maybe I'll just have the nylon come in right at the start of that section, because I'm otherwise not really liking it, like anywhere.
And I will treat you.
I'm getting rid of the nylon altogether. Oh, I've already got serious fatigue here. I guess I've got this this little bit of Easter egg. That's just totally unnecessary. It's kind of fun. Part of me wishes I could keep it, but nah. But despite a few moments of meaningful change, the sentiment was mostly, oh, y'all, I'm not enjoying this. This is just so many freaking tracks. It gets tiring, but you know, it's all gonna add up in the end, right? Is that right? Is it right? I sure hope so. But finally, many clicks and keys later. Okay, I think that about covers it. Mix down number 3. I hope that that mix of this song says everything that I want this song to say. But it's possible that it won't. I'm not going to make that decision right now. I'm going to come back to this mix later through a different sound source and think about whether anything stands out. But before I let you go, we're going to do one more thing. I'm going to open a new session in Audacity. I'm going to grab each of these mix downs that I performed over the course of this video. Let's listen to how they sound compared to each other. Let's first listen to the rough mix that I was working with, really for tracking purposes, in the R4.
You take off your shoes, and I rock like an ocean, and you pull like the moon.
I think you can hear when those mixes are side by side, the R4's mix was significantly muddier. Just all kinds of indistinct shit happening that is totally cleared out, even in this very first mix down, I think largely from the tracks that I removed. Now let's try to compare that to mix number 2, which is after we applied that broad strokes EQing approach.
And loosen my time. We're both laughing and we don't know why. I seek whatever you hide, and I come back with water. And you take off your shoes, and I rock like.
Honestly, I'm not sure that this second mix sounds noticeably better than the first mix. Maybe a little bit more open, but it's not a dramatic difference. And the reason why I'm dwelling on this is because I like to have a sense of like how far along am I in the process of chasing a good final mix. Based on this comparison, I gotta believe that I was vast majority of the way there just doing mix number 1, getting the levels and panning the way that I wanted them to. And that's notable because those are the only 2 parameters that you can control in a device like Tascam's DP006, which I don't have here with me. That's treated, and I've talked about it as an extraordinarily like limited feature type device, and you know, those features seem especially feeble when you've got little knobs to control them, but you can go a long way with just panning and volume. So now I'm actually gonna ignore mix 2. I wanna see how mix 1 and mix 3 compare to each other. So let's do mix 1.
I wipe sweat and loosen my tie. Laughing and we don't know why. I seek whatever you hide, and I come back with one.
Let's do another comparison. Let's go out here to the outro. Just sat here and spent 30 minutes cleaning out passages of audio that I thought were messy, making sure that everything was just right, even removing that nylon guitar that I thought was muddying the mix and not adding that much, and so help me. I mean, in those limited examples, I just didn't feel like there was that much extra. Now, am I going to undo all the work that I did? No, but this makes me feel even more certain that with those limited parameters that you can, by the way, control on almost every multi-tracker or DAWless device, you can get a long way toward a really good sounding mix. And you wouldn't have to spend all the time that I just spent tweaking EQ and then trying to silence all those parts. I hope I've made my point, because I can't look at or listen to this anymore. So what have we learned from this process? Well, I feel good, I guess, about coming into this mix with a plan that was informed by the stuff that I've learned over the years mixing on DAWless devices. I kind of wish that that plan had been more radical, and maybe if I mix in a DAW again, it will be more radical. But honestly, this has reminded me that I really don't need to go to the effort of putting all these tracks on my computer to do the lion's share of the work toward a good sounding, at least a mix that sounds good to me. But you have different ears and different experiences. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments. And by the way, some of you are probably wondering, like, where are all the other steps that someone would perform in a normal mix? And I already addressed all those steps in what I sort of consider step 0 of my mixing process, what I like to call pre-mixing. I ran most of the sounds that I recorded for this track through this pedal board of preamp, EQ, compressor, weirdness, and delay, or some combination of those, and used them to create the sounds that I was chasing. So when I knew, for example, that I might want some compression on the lead vocal, I just applied it on the way in, turned the knobs until it sounded good, and went for it. And that way I had one less thing to do when I finally sat down to do this particular version of a mix, but it works in every workflow. And it makes my process more satisfying and I think more efficient when I do little bits of it along the way rather than saving all the work for the end. And speaking of the end, I think this is the end of my video. Thank you so much for your time, your patience. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know, as always, what you think in the comments, and most importantly, take care of yourselves. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you around.